All right, welcome to a bonus episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver and your bonus Saturday episode here at Talking Buffalo. My name is Patrick Moran. Thank you very much, as always, for listening to the show, for watching, however you consume the show. I appreciate you all very, very much. Also, big shout out to our sponsor, Sunny Reds, 1841 Aber Road, just minutes down the way from Highmark Stadium. If you're a karaoke person and you're listening to this late on Friday, early Saturday, karaoke, Sunny Reds, that place just absolutely pops when they have that. So stop on by. Sunny Reds, great wings, obviously, as well. All right. Night 2 of the NFL draft just concluded, and the Bills went big, literally and figuratively. They trade up for a defensive tackle. They take an edge with a round 3 pick that they did not have when this day started. On the video side, we are live right now, and I apologize to the regular watchers of this show because I did advertise 11:30 p.m. And then I was talking to Mike Bundt, who is my guest right now from Trainwreck Sports, and I said, you know what? We ain't waiting 11:30. It's been a long day, a long night. How you doing, Mike? Before we get going, too, by the way, nice meeting you in person for the first time. Mike and I met Tuesday at Sal Capaccio's live sales sports show at Sports City Pizza Pub, and I need to offer you a quick apology of sorts too, because near the end, not before the show or during the show, afterwards, when we were all conversing, started talking Sabres, and you brought up Kevin Adams, and the second you brought out Kevin Adams, that wall went up on me, man. I love you, Mike. You're a cool dude. You brought up Kevin Adams. You're a much more passionate Sabres fan and content creator than I am. That wall went immediately up as soon as I heard the name Kevin Adams. But anyway, man, what's going on? How you doing? And thanks for jumping on the pod here on little notice too on a live bonus Saturday episode.
I'm doing great. I appreciate you reaching out. It was great meeting you as well on Tuesday. I actually should be the one apologizing for bringing up Kevin Adams. I understand the Sabres are a sensitive topic, and I shouldn't just throw that at people unexpectedly, albeit more of a passion of mine than most in Buffalo right now. But I'm feeling good right now. The NFL draft is one of my favorite weekends of the year, and I think there's a lot of reasons to be excited after 2 days for this draft.
There is, and there's a lot of people, Bills fans, who for whatever reason don't share that sentiment right now. We'll kind of get into that throughout this show as well. And it's also, by the way, it's really nice to be home here back in my home studio for night 2. Last night, night 1, Resurgence Brewing, that was awesome. The crowd was awesome, but the internet sucked. It was really hot in there, and just it was hard to be able to do the show. So to be able to look at multiple screens right now and be comfortable is really, really cool. Lots to talk about. All right. But let's start with the most obvious. Okay. Everyone and their mother had the Bills going in some form, some order of corner, defensive tackle, and edge in mock drafts, whether they were especially Bills content creators, national media people, for the most part as well. Again, maybe not necessarily in that order, but we all established that cornerback and defensive tackle far and away were the two biggest needs on the Bills. You can make an argue for edge, and then with like receiver, safety being kind of like secondary needs right now. The Bills did quite literally what in real life, what we projected, most of us did anyway, that they were going to do in these mock drafts. Maybe the players are a little bit surprising. Well, 2 of them anyway, but again, they did what almost we all saw coming. I don't know if you've had an opportunity right now, and if you're watching this on the video side, you want to leave a comment, I'll definitely throw some of these up. I've already seen a couple that are kind of igniting that point that there's a lot of Bills fans that don't seem too happy right now. But before we talk about the fans and how they feel about it, taking the players aside through 2 nights, Mike, don't you kind of feel like, as it pertains to the Bills anyway, that this draft has pretty much went the way it was supposed to go?
Yeah, I would say this is mission accomplished through 2 days in this draft. And we were saying all off season they needed to address the defensive line and that they needed to get some secondary help. That's exactly what the Bills just did through the first 3 rounds. I understand that people didn't expect some of the names, but what are we really basing that off of? Are we basing that off of some random mock drafts or random top 100 player rankings? How many people have watched TJ Sanders at South Carolina? How many people are watching Arkansas games on Saturdays? Who's watching Kentucky play half the weekends during the fall? This is something that really bothers me because everybody checks the rankings of a few random experts, and then it just becomes spoken that these are the guys that you have to select. I don't know if the players are going to pan out. I don't know if they're going to be great, but you have a general manager and a coaching staff that have had the second most wins in the NFL over the last 5 years, who have a strategy that works and have a scouting staff, have an entire team that is devoted to finding guys based on their personality, their scheme fit, their size, their measurables, their personality. And we're just going to assume, oh, I know more as a fan that never even watched one game of half these teams play. It's crazy talk. And to me, it's bothersome because I watch more college football than 95% of people. And even I'm not to the point where I could tell you one way or another if these guys are going to pan out or not.
Listen, everything you just said is very fair. I'll say this, like last year, I was on the boat. You could have said everything about the Bills being successful and all this. A year ago, I did not like the draft, and I was pretty outspoken and pretty vocal about it. Fans are just always going to feel some kind of way. That's just the way it goes. Good, bad, both variations, of each. For me, this is a point I want to make too. Is for me personally, right now, again, in the moment, real time. I mean, these picks were just made within the last 1 to 2 hours or so. The Bills with 2 new additions to the defensive line, which we'll talk about here in a few, how they fit and how we feel about them. This is a big departure for me from last year. To your point, what I was talking about, I was pretty instantly critical of the Bills draft last year. I didn't like it. And again, you're right. I didn't watch a lot of FSU last year. You know what I mean? I didn't watch a lot of Utah football and seeing Cole Bishop play. I didn't watch Duke play a lot and Dwayne Carter. But I didn't like the Keon Coleman pick last year at the time. I thought there were other players, just my own personal taste, my preference. You know what I mean? 1 year, we'll see. You're not going to judge a career in 1 year. But anyway, I didn't like the Keon pick last year. I did not like the Dwayne Carter pick last year. I was pretty good on the Cole Bishop pick. This year, first initial reaction anyway, and again, I haven't really had a lot of time to digest most of this. I like these picks. I feel like they're different types of players to me right now. Like Trey Edwards, who, by the way, I think he won like pick 50 or something like that. He lasted to, he was regarded.
Trey Amos 61 to Washington.
Wow. So a lot of people who were really pissed off on the live show yesterday, saying that Trey Amos should have been the pick. Well, guess what? He lasted almost 30 picks on night 2 before somebody took him. But here's my point. Trey Amos is and by the way, I saw Trey White comparisons with him, which I thought was pretty wild. A high floor, maybe a lower ceiling type player, where Max Hairston feels like he can be a low floor guy. Like if he's bad, he might be really bad because he can't tackle shit. Kind of like if he's good, he'll be Asante Samuel or better. If he's not, he's going to be Asante Samuel and that he can't tackle and he's not going to be a playmaker. You know what I mean? But the ceiling is Duke could be like Jalen Ramsey in his prime type player, confident, swaggy, big time playmaker. There's a high ceiling. TJ Sanders, I kind of feel the same way. He's kind of like a high ceiling, not necessarily the safest floor though, with the Bills. And I kind of like that about both those guys. But here's my biggest takeaway, Mike, before we get in. I want to get your thoughts on this. Before we get into these players, this is my biggest takeaway after 2 nights of this draft. And far and away, this is my biggest takeaway. The microscope now is on, and it certainly should be on, Bobby Babich and Sean McDermott. This defense better get it done when it matters most. You don't get Josh Allen a lot of help throughout the offseason. I mean, they did sign Josh Palmer, but, They haven't drafted anybody so far, and we're now 3 rounds in. So Josh carries the offense. We all know that, okay? And he's capable of that. But the Bills have poured in heavy, heavy, heavy resources, free agency into this defensive line. And now through the draft, they take a corner, they take a defensive tackle, they take an edge. There's no more excuses for this defense. They cannot fall on their face against the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs or, to Cincinnati a couple of years ago. When it matters most in the playoffs, they got to be better. And if they're not, it's time to put that microscope more on Sean McDermott and Bobby Babbage, because Brandon Beane has given those guys every single resource that they could possibly use to make this a more impactful, better defense, right? That's how I feel right now. That's my big takeaway, generally speaking.
Yeah, I completely agree. The pressure now is on Babbage and McDermott to make sure that this defense doesn't fall short once again against Kansas City when it matters the most. And really, when you break down the playoffs and how the defense performs in those moments, it really has been mostly against Kansas City. Yes, there was the Cincinnati game included in there, but if you bring up the other games like Denver, Baltimore, you could talk about earlier games like Indianapolis and so forth, Pittsburgh. The defense didn't struggle against other teams. It's one common opponent that they always get bested by. And it's tough saying it, but you're going up against maybe the best offensive mind of all time in Andy Reid, combined with who I believe, when it's all said and done, will go down as the greatest quarterback of all time in Patrick Mahomes. So it's no easy feat for anyone. That's why we've seen Kansas City go to 3 straight Super Bowls, 5 total, and win 3 during this period of time. But at the end of the day, it's a clear indication by Beane that he's basically saying we can't accept our defense falling short and failing our MVP quarterback. We saw last year the Bills offense can score 30 points a game with next to no offensive weapons. So if they can do that with that group, there is no excuse to not have a better investment defensively and try to get what's needed to get the job done.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And, there'd be a school of thought. You can't stop the Kansas City Chiefs on defense. I'll score them. Just keep getting weapons and putting your resources in the offense. But they don't really need to, because they were successful without it last year. The whole everybody eats mantra worked. You could think it's corny out there, and a lot of people do, but the shit works. And if it works, it works. But now you look at the defense in this offseason, and my God, man, I mean, holy shit, dude. You talk about Joey Bosa, they give $12 million to. They give Larry Ogunjobi a significant 1-year contract. More on him in just a few minutes. Michael Hoyt, a 3-year deal. I thought eventually he's going to be the guy who kind of takes over AJ Epinesa, but a different type of player. But, that third defensive end. And then you get into the draft, and your first-round pick is a corner. And then you trade up in the second round, and you go get a defensive tackle, and then you go get another edge. It's like, how many resources do you need? If you can't get this done, look, I'm not here to say today, all right? I'm not trying to say, Mike, if the Bills defense falls on their face in the playoffs, it's time to fire Sean McDermott, because that's just not going to happen. If the Bills are in the playoffs and if they're competitive, Sean McDermott's not going anywhere anytime soon, whether people like to hear that or not. But it's like, I just don't know what more you can do. What more can you do? And this doesn't even count guys who are good players like Gruden and Bernard and Milano and Teron Johnson. You know what I mean? Christian Bedford. It feels like there's a lot of talent right now on this defense. And you do have to start wondering, do you agree, if they fall flat again, and I don't care, and you're right, but I don't care if he's one of the greatest offensive minds, arguably the greatest of all time, and Patrick Mahomes is arguably the greatest quarterback of all time. If you can't find a way to get it done, you got to start thinking, man, who will get it done? What defensive guy can we bring in? Who can we bring in that is going to find a way to shut down Patrick Mahomes? Because guess what? Other teams have done it in the playoffs. We just saw the Eagles, what they did. You know what I mean? Tampa Bay did it a couple years ago. It's been done. The Bengals have beaten them in the playoffs before, but the Bills just can't. And being second best is okay, but it's not best. You know what I'm saying? With the defense.
It's tough. It's tough, Pat. And the problem is, okay, so if the defense falters again and the offense continues to put up 30 points a game, you have this problem where you have one of the best defensive minds in football, but he can't stop the one team that consistently gets in your way. So the question would be, a lot of people would say, well, bring in an offensive mind, outscore him. But that doesn't really help you at all because your offense is already clicking at a high level. So then you're saying, we're going to replace one of the best defensive minds, but we're going to get an even better defensive mind. And that's a risk because if you go the opposite direction, then you're not as good of a team going forward. So the Bills are in this dilemma where they kind of just have to continue waiting it out, or they have to just go all out and make a major change that just goes against anything that they've been doing the last 5 years. And when you dig deeper, they said something like the Bills have 68 wins, I think, the last 5 years, which is the most out of any team in a period of span that hasn't gone to the Super Bowl. And you look at it, they have this historic consistency and high level of play and scoring margin. There's just one team they can't beat. And it's every year in the most important game of their season, which then begs the question, is it performance anxiety? Is it getting out coached? Is it players not stepping up to the challenge? Is it a combination of all three? And then when I look at defensively, what they're trying to do here, what I really think is happening in this situation is this is phase 2 of Josh Allen's prime. The old school defensive players that were carrying the top defenses of the Bills in the past, they're gone now. You don't have Micah Hyde. You don't have Jordan Poyer. Trey White is back, but he's not the old Trey White. Matt Milano is older. You basically have switched out the big names on this defense. So we identified that corner 2 is an issue, that defensive line is an issue. So why do you sign the guys that you sign to one-year deals or short-term contracts and then draft? To me, what they're saying is that we need experienced free agents that can come in, plug in right away, and bring us value. But these are not the guys that are going to be carrying us 2, 3, 4 years from now. We need to have guys that can come in, develop at the same time, while we also have guys on expensive contract extensions that are going to be carrying our defense for the next 3 to 5 years in Benford, Bernard, Rousseau at different core positions of the defense. To me, what they're trying to do, they're trying to get their defense set up, not just for this year, but to have sustainable success for the next 5 years. So Josh will at least, maybe they'll never be top 2, 3, 4, but they will be consistently top 10 units, or at least that's the thought process.
Listen, I think the first 2 picks for sure. I feel like Landon Jackson, and we'll talk about it in a minute, kind of in the mold of A.J. Epinesa. I think the first 2 picks were designed for the Kansas City Chiefs. You know, you got to get another 3 tech guy. You have Oliver and Sanders ideally in your mind. That's like your version of Milton Williams or Jalen Carter last year. And the speed of Max Harrison to be able to run with those Chiefs receivers. Again, the defensive line was as bad as it was against the Chiefs. The secondary was a lot worse. They looked like they were running around with, shit stuck in them. Heavy lead feet, try to run around with those Kansas City receivers in the AFC Championship game. They got speed in the secondary. That's why I'm kind of baffled why so many people don't like this pick. Let me tell you this, Mike. One of my favorite things about Hairston on night 1 and TJ Sanders on night 2 tonight is I hate what ifs. And I feel like there's going to be very few what ifs at these positions. Just like, with Hairston, they could have had Amos. They could have had Will Johnson. They could have had Benjamin Morris. They could have had Azari Thomas. All those guys went in rounds 2 and 3 here on Friday night. They had their pick of that litter at corner, and they chose to have Hairston. You know what I mean? So unless you really like Janae Barron from Texas, who went pick 20, you had your pick of the litter. So there's no what ifs like, oh, God, man, did we settle on Hairston because Amos and Will Johnson were gone? You know what I mean? You're not going to have that, and I love that. And when it comes to TJ Sanders here on Friday night, he was the first defensive tackle off the board in round 2. The Bills moved up from 56 to 41. If they wanted Darius Alexander, if they wanted Alfred Collins, if they wanted Joshua Farmer or others, they could have got him. They moved up to 41. They could have had any of those guys, and they took Sanders. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of like that element. I will say, going back to round one, I do wish Malachi Starks would have been on the board because there was a lot of late hype about him going to the Bills. He went to the Ravens a few picks before that. But when it comes to corners, they had their pick. When they came to defensive tackles here in night 2, they had their pick. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to go through the next couple of years saying, what if? Like last year with the Bills with Keon Coleman, what if they would have just kept their pick and they could have had Xavier Worthy, or they could have had Leggett, who I'm still pretty high on in Carolina, even though he really didn't do shit last year. I'm not going to feel that way this year. They got the guys. They don't work out, but they got the guys that they wanted, right?
Yeah, 100%. And that's why I feel comfortable going forward, because at the end of the day, you have to trust that they know what they're doing. Doesn't mean that they're going to get it right. They could be completely wrong, but you want them to have conviction. You want them to have confidence in their approach, because if they don't believe in their approach, then none of this matters anyway. They're not going to have sustainable success. It's going to fall apart. It's not going to work out. The Bills' defense has been consistently good throughout the years, at least in the regular season, because they have guys that fit certain criteria, have certain personalities, and they fit together as a unit. So when I see the Bills have 5 corners that they can choose from at 30, and they choose Maxwell Hairston, that means that they see something in him that will fit. The same with having the conviction to trade up for TJ Sanders overall. And then we all know with Landon Jackson that they had met and talked to him several times. These are guys that they feel comfortable with, that they whether it's personality, play on the field, combination of whatever, and we should have some confidence in them overall. Now, as I said a couple times already, does not mean it's going to work out, but I'm with you. I would rather have these situations than the what if situations of where you end up thinking, well, God, if they went this route, or if this guy wasn't already taken and they just made a little bit of a move up to get him. We'll see how it works out. It's draft day. They have time, and all of these guys have traits or skills that can turn into something. So I'm never going to kill a pick day 1, day 2 if I can see the logic and reasoning behind it. And I can understand where Beane is going with all 3 of these guys.
Just again, and this is not, look, it's not unique here in 2025. All right. You could go any year, literally in the entire history of the Bills and 31 other franchises. Fans are going to be passionate. They're going to overreact. I'm going to be passionate. I'm going to overreact. So I'm not saying I'm different than fans. I'm just a content creator, whatever. I get all that. Look, I think there's a lot to like. Okay. And we're going to hit on that, of course, with this draft, but for the sake of kind of being objective a little bit and maybe trying to, instead of me just saying, oh, fans don't like these picks, they're stupid or any of that shit, let me try to put myself in the mind of people who don't like these picks for whatever reason that they may be right now. Because I think there's a couple things about these first couple picks anyway. Landon Jackson, to me, in the 3rd round is just pretty straightforward. I feel like he is who he is, and you know what you're going to get with him. The first 2, I'll say this. When it comes to Hairston, Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott both went on tangents, literally tangents, in March about they want their cornerbacks to be great tacklers. And I'll tell you, the reason why I remember that so vividly is because until that presser, I was all aboard the Bills are going to go sign Asante Samuel Jr. train. I really thought at one time that was going to happen. And then they were talking about draft prospects, and he goes, well, I want corners who are really good tacklers, who are good at that part of their game. And I'm like, yep, Asante Samuel is not going to be a Buffalo Bill. I remember that very, very well. So they want corners who could tackle. Max Harrison's got a lot of good traits right now. At this time, and it could change. He'll grow. He'll get coached. He'll get better. He ain't a good tackling ain't his forte. He ain't interested in, well, I shouldn't say he's not interested in tackling. He is interested in tackling. He just ain't very good at it. All right. So that's the knock on him right now. So that's a little bit puzzling. You hear your GM, your head coach say, I want a corner who can tackle, and then you go draft a speedster, a man coverage, or his own coverage guy, but not a great tackler. And then it's been assumed throughout this process that the Bills would want a true, more a defensive tackle who's more of a classic one-tech guy, to really kind of replace Daquan Jones and anchor the middle of that line. And TJ Sanders is not really that. Like, now he's not another Ed Oliver clone. So let's be clear on that. All right. He's not Ed Oliver clone. And he actually's got some traits I think that are actually better than Ed Oliver. But he's closer to me to Ed Oliver than he is Daquan Jones. You know what I mean? Like right now, you look at their 3D or their 3 techs, and you got Ed Oliver and Brandon Beane at the press conference after the picks on Friday said that primarily Sanders is a 3 tech. I mean, Brandon Beane, the GM, said that. And he also said Dwayne Carter, for the moment, is going to be the backup to Daquan Jones. Don't love that. But anyway, and then Larry Ogunjobi is primarily a 3 tech guy. Like Larry Ogunjobi got a pretty cute, pretty handsome free agent contract with some guaranteed money despite the suspension. Now I'll lose some money because of the suspension, but so I could see if I'm putting myself in the eyes of some of the more critical Bills fans right now. Well, we need a 1 tech. Daquan Jones is kind of the old long in the tooth weakness of this football team, and you got another 3 tech, and we need to be better and more physical with tackling with our corners, and you got a guy who can't tackle. Kind of makes sense to you. Like I said, and I preface it, I do like these picks, but I also understand why it can be perceived on some levels as puzzling.
Yeah, and I respect that. I'm not Mr. Homer Bills fan that's going to be saying everything Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott do is correct. I'm not that guy. I'm willing to be critical of them, regardless of whether it's Josh Allen or someone on the defense, whoever. If somebody falls short in a big moment, I'm willing to speak out. What I understand the possible criticisms. Maxwell Hairston was not on the radar for a lot of the fan base. Now, he was a guy that many people thought could go late first round, early second round. I think more people were thinking of guys like obviously Trey Amos. They saw Will Johnson fall down. If you didn't know about the concerns, you'd be like, why are the Bills passing on Will Johnson? Obviously, Revel from East Carolina was a popular name who dropped considerably further in the draft.
Yeah, third round.
And then you hear about Hairston's tackling issues, and you're like, that doesn't line up with what Brandon Beane has said in the past. As a former sports anchor, what I've learned a long time ago when covering coaches, GMs, different players, what they say to the media is not what they actually feel half the time.
Sure.
There's a difference between what you say and what you believe. A couple years ago when the Bills drafted Dorian Williams, people were in an uproar because they had just drafted the same thing that they had in Terrell Bernard, and Terrell Bernard did nothing as a rookie. And people were like, what the heck are we doing here? Well, then you see the plan for Terrell Bernard. You see what they end up doing Dorian Williams. Give it a couple seasons, and then some of it makes a little bit of sense. There's a short-term plan. There's long-term plans. The Bills are not telling us what they're doing with these guys. They're not being straightforward with them. Right now, they say Dwayne Carter might be a 1 tech. They might draft a 1 tech late in the draft or get a UDFA, and then next thing you know, Dwayne Carter is back to where he was, and he's in a competition. So I never take too much of what they say at face value, because I think a lot of that is just BS, to be honest with you. And if you read the tea leaves as a fan, if you can puzzle the pieces together, normally you can tell what is them being serious versus what is coach speak or GM speak. Now, with Sanders at D tackle, I get it. A lot of Bills fans are concerned about them against the run. They want a big body that can take on double teams. Let's be real. Those aren't guys that you invest early round picks in. At least not Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott. They don't value it. They just don't value it. And I think that's been proven time and time again through what they go after when they draft defensive tackles. So people can choose to get upset by that. But if you just follow their track history, they were never going to get a big man. And that's just based on what they do.
I I get a kick out of some overreactions. One of them I got to put up here. Ty and Andy says, hell yeah, New England is going to beat the shit out of us this year. All right, you've arrived at that conclusion. And let's see, where we at here about, I don't even know if my watch is dead. Jesus Christ. About, I don't know, roughly 11:30 or so on Friday. Look, when it comes to TJ Sanders, all right, so he's had 8.5 sacks, 17 tackles for a loss in his last 2 years of South Carolina. And again, I'm not going to, I'm not a homer. Everybody knows that shit. I'm probably the opposite. I'm gonna get too damn hard on the team, but he was one of the guys that I liked, man. I had a list of draft crushes, and he was on it. I think he's a very skilled player. He's a very athletic guy. He was a pre-draft visitor, which, by the way, for now on, if you guys are listening to the show and you're gonna do Bills mock drafts going forward, do not put a Buffalo Bill in the first round if he has not been a top 30 pre-draft visit, because the Bills ain't going to draft him, and they're probably not going to in the second. All three of these guys who got drafted so far were top 30 visits for the Bills. I just want to throw that out there. 9.38 RAS score, which relative athletic score. I'll be honest with you, I really don't know what that shit means, but I know the higher it is, the more athletic you are. That's like in the top 6% of all defensive tackles that have been measured going all the way back to 1987, man. He's a good athlete for a big guy. He was an all-state high school basketball player. Again, he may be more of a natural 3-tech, but like I said earlier, don't compare. He's no Ed Oliver clone. Those guys could play together, okay? And a lot of people are talking about him being so small. He says that he's going to play at around 305 pounds or so. DaQuan Jones is only 315. There's only a 10-pound difference. There's Brandon Beane said, again, he primarily is going to be a 3-tech. And I just feel like this is a move to get better pass rushing. Who besides Ed Oliver on this team consistently can get up the middle with any kind of effectiveness and consistency at rushing the passer? You tell me. Is it DaQuan Jones? Is it Dwayne Carter? Is it Quentin Jefferson? Jordan Phillips, I guess maybe a tiny bit. But, Jordan Phillips played once a month. I mean, come on. What are we doing here? This is a guy who get after the quarterback. I'm all about fans being skeptical, and I kind of embrace and respect that, but I just don't get it here, man. I'm like, what do you want at pick 41? I like TJ Sanders. I'm not going to go get it. I was going to say I'm going to get a TJ Sanders jersey, but that shit's a lie. I ain't getting no TJ Sanders jersey, but I like the pick, man. He's a very athletic guy, and I think he'll be able to do a lot of things on this football field. But again, Bobby Babbage, get the best out of him.
All I could think while you're going on that rant was, oh no, we have another D tackle that can rush the passer. Like, what a horrible thing to have behind Ed Oliver in a rotation. And I get it. I get where fans are thinking, but is it a bad thing to have another D tackle that is capable of rushing the quarterback? Like who cares if he doesn't? We get so obsessed as fans on, okay, we can't stop the run, that we don't ever, a lot of us don't ever spend the time to think, why don't we stop the run? Well, because we have a nickel defense that is aimed at stopping passing attacks, because the modern NFL is all around passing. So I think sometimes we don't put enough context to it. The Bills are okay with letting teams run on them because that's what the analytics say. Let them run on you. Focus on getting to the quarterback. Get pressure. Put them back behind the chains. They want to run it on first down for 4 yards. Go ahead. Let them. And I get it. That goes against old school football. It's frustrating to watch. But at the end of the day, there's a reason why the Bills defense, even during bad years, is typically a top 10 to 12 analytic defense.
I want to pull up a comment here because this is one I actually am. And again, I'm being honest. Now, look, I like TJ Sanders. I'm not saying that, I was hell bent on TJ Sanders. I'm not going to go that far. J. Anthony Baglini says, I wanted Mike Green. I kind of did too when it got to that point of the draft. And of course, where does he go? Baltimore Ravens. They got Mike Green and Starks, man. God, the rich just get richer. That team, the Baltimore Ravens, are so freaking good at drafting defense. It makes me sick. I got a lot of comments, by the way. that we're going to get to. I'm kind of saving them kind of to illustrate. Well, some of them are objective. Some of them are just purely critical of this draft. Here's what I want to do real quick, Mike, and everybody who's listening and watching. I'm going to take on the video side, literally a 3-second break. On the audio side, you'll hear a commercial. On the video side, I'm literally going to be back in about 3 seconds. All right, I am back here with Mike Bundt from Trainwreck Sports. We are really late in the Friday night. It's almost midnight now. Pretty lively crowd, too, following rounds 2 and 3 of this draft. We're almost up to 1,000 people watching this live right now on the video side. I thank you all very, very much. Thoughts on Landon Jackson? Pick 72. Again, they didn't have a third rounder originally. This was part of the trade. Let me ask you this. I should have asked you this before. TJ Sanders, we're just talking about the player, about the trade. Like the Bills gave up 56, 62, and 109. So they gave up both their 2s and a 4, and they moved up 15 spots in round 2, and they picked up a 3rd, which is pick 72, and they got a 7th rounder. So it was a 3-for-3 swap. The draft value chart, the Rich Hill draft chart, says that the Bills did actually well when it comes to value. Like the Bills actually won technically in by points. So some people are saying this is an overpay. I, again, don't agree. I think this was, if time will tell if TJ Sanders was worth it or not, ultimately, but I don't think this was an overpay, and the draft chart doesn't think it as well. You agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty fair trade overall. If you think it's an overpay, it's mostly because you believe that you could have had TJ Sanders or an equivalent level D tackle staying put at 56 and then kept 109 without needing to give that up. So I understand people that are skeptical of the trade, but any chart that would show that it was equal or the Bills winning on that would basically be saying so, because the value of getting a mid-second round pick is that much higher than being the late second round. And even if, let's throwing out the 4th round pick and getting a late round pick back, you went from 56 to 41, and then you went from 62 to 72. You basically moved up to ensure you're going to get the guy you want while trading back, knowing that Landon Jackson is probably not going to be taken in the first 2 rounds and that you're still going to have a good shot at getting him in the 3rd round. It was a low risk, high reward. I'm going to ensure that I'm going to get my guy.
Yeah.
And the way you were talking earlier about what ifs, you want to avoid what ifs, you make the move, you get your guy. I have no problem with it, but I understand why some fans might not like giving up 109 and moving back later in the draft.
I agree with the sentiment of the trade. Like I said, you move up 15, you go back 10, and you give up a 4th for a 7th. I think the risk is worth the reward there, but I will say there is a risk on the player itself, especially when you're taking a guy who, again, a lot of people criticize is probably not going to be a starter. He might play a lot, but he's probably not a starter because you're probably going to want that one bigger tech, a 1st, 2nd down type of guy. But we'll see on that. Again, it's April. Let's see what Sean McDermott comes up with. Landon Jackson. All right, so they get him 72 overall, 8th pick in the 3rd round, 6'6", 264. If you're a Bills fan and you've paid attention to this offseason, this process, you should be pretty familiar with Landon Jackson because he's talked to the Bills like a gazillion times. He had 6.5 sacks last year, 9.5 tackles for a loss, 3-year starter at Arkansas. Athletic in some ways. Highest jump of anyone at the combine among defensive edge guys, and 2nd farthest jump. He's a good run defender. It's ironically ESPN's Matt Miller compares him literally to AJ Epinesa. That's his player comparison. Joe Marino, somebody who I respect very, very much, was is high on him. He said he would have been okay if he picked him at 30. I was like, all right, well, I can get on board with that. Dane Brugler from The Athletic had him as his 9th edge rusher and 47th overall prospect. The downside, maybe a little bit of a less downside because he's a 3rd round guy. All right. This is not pick 30. This is pick 72. He's not a great pass rusher. 6.5 sacks each of his last 2 seasons. again, the AJ Epinesa comparison, 6.5, 6.5 for AJ Epinesa. That's like a lock every year. Now I'm going to be honest with you. I like Landon Jackson, but if it was me, I would have taken Xavier Watts, or I would have taken a wide receiver like Jalen Noel. That's my personal opinion there. But I don't dislike the Landon Jackson pick. My only question is, if you're looking at a scope for 2025, where's his path to getting a lot of playing time? That's what I don't see this year. But again, when you get to the third round, it's not really about the first year. It's about the next three. Terrell Bernard's a great example of that. Just recently, kind of agree with that. Like, don't judge Landon Jackson on what he does this year, because that path, especially once Hoyt comes back and Bosa ramps up some, the path to him being on the field a lot is probably not going to be there if guys stay healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we went through the drought period where we were so used to seeing third and fourth rounders play as youngsters that we assume that that's just how it works. And it really isn't. If you talk to NFL people, the thought process is your first round pick better be a starter on your team right away, at least the majority of the time. Top 10 pick, they should be a blue chip good player right away. First round pick should be a starter. Second round pick, good chance of being a starter, or at least a solid contributor. Third round and beyond, you're talking possibility of contributing, possibility of being a starter on a bad team. On a team like the Bills that's consistently winning 11 plus games every year, normally it's going to be a developmental guy that you're hoping that after their rookie season, they have a chance to contribute at a decent level as a second-year player. So what's Landon Jackson going to be as a rookie? Probably near the bottom of the edge rotation, getting limited snaps. But if an injury happens, if he splashes in training camp or preseason, maybe he can carve out a little bit of a role. Edge, it's interesting with this Bills D-line. I was never enamored by it at the start of last year when a lot of the fan base thought it was going to be a really good defensive line. And I think we went from a spot where it was overrated at the beginning of last year to a point where now it's a little bit underrated as a unit overall. I don't think this is a great defensive line, but I think the pieces they have and how it can go together, they have the ability to be pretty good if it can all mesh in time for the season.
I want to pull up a comment from RJ Mevel in here because this kind of ties into what I was going to say next. RJ says the first 3 rounds need to be starters at minimum. I don't agree with that. The first rounder needs to be a starter. The second rounder should be a starter at minimum. He should be an impactful type of player. I think when you get to the third round, if Landon Jackson, look, if I told you before the draft, Landon Jackson is going to be AJ Epinesa. He's going to get you 6.5 sacks. He's going to make some splash plays. He's going to be relatively solid, but not even close to spectacular. He'll have some moments, it'll be pretty steady, but nothing great. That's what I feel like AJ Epinesa is. If I told you that's going to be Landon Jackson, but Landon Jackson was picked in the first round, I'd be like, well, that pick sucks. All right. Second round, I'd be like, don't love it. Third round, you go give me a solid contributing role player on this football team with a third round pick. I'm with that. If he could get you 6.5 sacks, if Landon Jackson could get you 6.5 sacks starting next year for the next 3 years after that, would you sign up for it? A round 3 guy? I think I would.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And it also matters based on position. If you're drafting a safety in the first or second round, or even potentially the third round, you're thinking, okay, they can start. They can win the competition. We're talking about a defensive end right now that has Greg Rousseau and Joey Bosa already on this line. No third round pick is starting ahead of either of those guys. AJ Epinesa, for as middle of the pack as he has as a defensive end, he's still a guy that gets you 6 sacks a year. That's a worthy quality backup. I'm not going to say he's good, but he's deserving of being a backup in the NFL and getting snaps. You look at the spots next to him, Michael Hoyt, versatility, offers a lot of flexibility. Even Javon Solomon, he had some moments. I'm not going to say he's going to be good, but way too early to really say either way with Solomon.
He splashed a little bit as a fifth round rookie.
To say that some player that has never taken an NFL snap should just come in and be a starter right away, I think it's a little naive. And I I don't think that we sometimes realize how difficult it is, that transition going from playing in college to the NFL. Sure, some of these stars make it look easy, but that's why most of them are first round picks. It's hard for a lot of these athletes to make that transition where you look at Landon Jackson. He was a second team All SEC last year, a first team All SEC the year before, and he goes 72nd overall in the draft. You're talking about a guy that probably at every level he's ever been has been the best guy on the field or the second best guy at his position on almost any week he's ever played football. And coming into Buffalo, he's probably the fifth best defensive end day one when he comes to the building. Not saying he won't be better, but there's an adjustment. And I don't think enough people respect that transition from one level to the next.
I feel like the issue with the Bills right now at edge, with the exception of Joe Bosa, who I don't think, and you got to see it from Joe Bosa at this point, right? I need to see him go out there, stay healthy, and be the kind of guy who can get you double-digit sacks. It's been a long time, all right? Take him aside, and plus he's only here for 1 year. Greg Rizzo is a very, very good player, but he's also a guy you just ain't going to get you double-digit sacks. He's never done it. 4 years, he's going in his 5th year. You got to get guys on the edge. So I could see, again, being objective and seeing both sides of the story for people who are pissed that they took a defensive tackle. I can understand. You go get a Mike Green type player. Huge risk, though. Huge risk. But I still feel this team needs impactful type players, and you got to take some chances. I feel like they did it with Max Harrison. Again, Trey Amos could have been a safer player. There's other corners who were higher floor than him, but just lower ceiling. A guy like Mike Green could flop, or he could be a 15 sack kind of guy. You know what I mean? And look, maybe the Bills still do something too after the draft, but I get that. With Hairston, I didn't really get to react to him on Thursday night because I was about 6 or 7 pints in. There was about 100 people there. Plus, again, the Bills picked, and literally Joe from Queens and I were on within 10 minutes after the pick. I was a little surprised, and I think a lot of people, like, again, I was at a draft party, so I got a real good gauge in person, not people online, but actually in person with a bunch of people. I think a lot of people were surprised because, again, I feel like mock drafts had us conditioned to think Trey Amos was going to be the pick. And what I did, going back and looking at mock drafts, final mock drafts from a lot of insiders, Jay Skursky, shout out to him, Buffalo News. The only guy I saw locally that had Hairston as his first pick. A lot of these, Mike, he was gone. Like, I went back, we did 4 mock drafts on my show, and all 4 of them, Maxwell Hairston was gone at 30 in every one of them. You know what I mean? So I think that's part of the surprise why people didn't love it as much, because I just don't think people were talked about him enough, because I don't think he was going to be there at 30. Honestly, that's how I feel about it. I don't know if you guys heard it. Greg Cassell, did you hear what he said on One Bills Live?
Yeah.
Or Joe from Queens likes to call it One Bills Live, but he said that Harrison's quarterback tape, he talked to a GM or an executive around the league who said Harrison's cornerback tape was better than Travis Hunter's. I was like, damn. All right, cool. But he can't tackle.
How many of these corners do tackle at a high level? Let's be real. Corners and tackles, tackling, it's always been a concern for a lot of these guys. And I would rather have good coverage ability than the tackling, to be honest with you.
I think it's possible to like a draft, but not necessarily be the guys that you would pick. Personally, like me, I don't know if I would have picked Max Hairston at 30. I think I would have, because he has that speed again. And I just watched the Chiefs, and it wasn't even just Xavier Worthy. I mean, guys who weren't even that fast were just running all over the Bills secondary, especially once Christian Benford went down in that game. And I can't get past that. And he has that trait that the Bills secondary, even Christian Benford, as great as Christian Benford is, speed's not his thing, man. So, just adding the speed. TJ Sanders, I don't think I would have taken him, but it doesn't mean that I don't like the pick and that I don't understand. That seems to be Mike, of all these picks so far, that seems to be the biggest thing. The Bills traded up for a defensive tackle. That's not about right to you, like the early vibes that you're getting. Again, this just happened not long ago, a few hours
Yeah.
ago. It's kind of like the Bills traded up for a backup defensive tackle. That's what the vibe feels like.
And I felt like that was going to come no matter who the person was going to be. There was such a buildup in the pre-draft process for guys like Kenneth Grant, Tyleik Williams, Derek Harmon, and all those guys were gone before the Bills even picked.
Not to cut you off, but let me ask you this. Did you hear that Tyleik Williams, did you hear what he said?
He thought he was going to go to Buffalo, right? Is that what he said?
Got drafted by Detroit at 28, and Tyleik Williams told reporters, he said that he was told the Bills were going to take him at 30, which is funny because Tyleik Williams is more of a DaQuan Jones type player, whereas TJ Sanders is more of a an Oliver player. But back to what we were discussing earlier, dude, like Darius Alexander, kind of more along the Oliver line. Joshua Farmer, kind of more along that line. Whereas, say, maybe Alfred Collins is a big ass boy. You know what I mean? He would have been a DaQuan Jones thing. Before I get to some comments, we're 2 nights in, 3 rounds in. What about this draft, if anything, or the team as things stand right now, disappoints you the most? And again, plenty of time to still address things. Whether it's a draft, free agency after, a trade, you never know. But right now, as things stand, what about this draft or just this team in general has been most disappointing for you, if anything? I got one that sticks out like a sore thumb for me.
So there's one spot I really want to get addressed day 3 of the draft, and I want a vertical threat wide receiver that can expand the field. That's why I was cool with Noel out of Iowa State. I really would have been fine if they took him at wide receiver at 72. I didn't expect it when I was doing my stream for Trainwreck. Me and Jake both said it's going to be Landon Jackson. There's so much meetings and back and forth talk about needing an edge. I never thought they were going to go wide receiver at that point. I was hoping for it a little bit selfishly.
Sure.
Josh Palmer is going to be a good player, but they don't have one player on offense that I truly believe in the passing game is dynamic. Khalil Shakir is probably the closest. He's good. He's going to put up quality numbers, but you look at Palmer, you look at Samuel, Coleman, Kincaid, Knox. There's just not that guy. And I wish there was someone that could stretch the field a little bit better. Maybe Palmer can be that guy, but he just hasn't done it yet. And we got to see how he can mesh with Josh Allen. So that'd be my only disappointment. But this draft essentially is going exactly how I anticipated, not the names per se, but the positions and where they're drafting the positions.
Sure. To your point about wide receivers, I would like to see at this point, so round 3 starting Saturday at noon. I mean, round 4, my bad. Trade up. Go get a receiver. There's 2 guys that are still out there that I really like a lot that are vertical threats. And I forgot, I meant to say him the first time. Jalen Royals is the guy that I really like. He is a vertical threat. I'm stunned that he's still there. I would trade up significantly high. What are they at? Like, I think 132 right now. And I think the draft picks up at 103. Make a move. You got a gazillion fifth rounders. Anyway, I like him and Deontay Thornton from Tennessee. Those are 2 receivers. I would love to see the Bills come away with one of them. But for me personally, what I'm most disappointed in right now with this Bills team as things stand today is you've invested a lot of resources in free agency on the defensive line. You've invested 2 draft resources on the defensive line. You invested a first-round pick in a corner. And I look at a defense, and I still think the DaQuan Jones being the anchor of it, the starting one tech, it's not ideal. He is at a point right now. I was a DaQuan Jones fan as recently as about a year or so ago. In fact, a year or so ago, maybe 13 months ago, I was pounding the table for the Bills to re-sign him. He's just not the same player anymore. The player that we saw the first month of 2023 before he got hurt in London, that player's gone. Last year, he was just a guy. Tell me a game where DaQuan Jones made a significant impact on a game last year. I don't think you'll find one. Now, you know how it is with one text, and those guys, they don't always get the stats, they don't get the sacks, they got jobs taking a blocker, stuff like that. I just don't think he's it anymore. And I look at this roster and they got a gazillion 3Ts. I don't buy Dwayne Carter, but he could prove me wrong. But DaQuan Jones right now, they have not upgraded anything with him. I would have been all right, like Jamari Caldwell from Oregon. I would have loved that pick in round 3 if they went instead of that with Landon Jackson. But that's the only thing right now. I look at this football team. A couple people said that they haven't got him in the chat. I've been kind of paying attention to that. And by the way, we're almost at 1,100 people live. Said the Bills haven't gotten better on defense. That's bullshit. They've clearly gotten better on defense. Come on, man. What are we talking about here? You got a first round pick and you brought Trey White back. Rasul Douglas was a shell. Okay. Von Miller got caught because he was playing 15 snaps a game in the playoffs. This team is deeper on the defensive line, and I think they're better. And I think they're going to be better at corner too, as well. Certainly have better depth than they did a year ago. Kyle Elam, enough said. Plays in an AFC championship game. But yeah, that's it, man. For me, Mike, it's defensive tackle, which is funny because I got so many of them, but specifically DaQuan Jones's position. Let me get to a couple of these, okay? Comments that I'm going to pull up, and we'll react to these, I guess. Again, this is a not impressed crowd for the most part. Greg, who's been a real big nuisance, by the way, in this chat the whole time. If you're okay with this draft, you're a homer at every level. I'm not a homer at any level. I think anybody who watches or listens to my show regularly certainly knows that, okay? I will lambaste the Bills when I feel it's warranted, just like I do with the Sabres. The Sabres is always warranted. I'm okay with this draft. It's a practical draft, and I feel like bigger swings. I think TJ Sanders is a bigger swing than a safer defensive tackle. And I think Maxwell Harrison is a bigger swing than a corner. So I hate that shit. You can support something and it'll make you a homer because you think that it's a good move or a good sound strategy right now. Let's see. Ty in hand, he says Brandon Beane, McDermott. That's what nothing but wrestlers on the team. WWR. That's not a comment I meant to bring up. Jason Pagel says horrible draft for Buffalo. Greg, name one position they got better and they didn't. We kind of went through this already. Steve Noble, we drafted guys. Steve, a big regular in this chat. Love that dude. We drafted guys the last 2 nights and nobody has a clue how they will turn out. This sounds like a Mike Bundt comment right here.
I'm a big fan of Steve, by the way. So
it's a guess. Our best and most successful pick of this draft may come tomorrow. Nobody knows. That's a good point. Level-headed. I mean, how many guys on the Bills actually are day 3 picks, man? Some pretty good players. Matt Milano, Teron Johnson.
It's easier to be negative or positive. The fact of it is, if you're being rational about a draft, that's the approach to have it. They did the work. They did the homework. They have all the information they need. They have a plan in place. We might not know exactly what the plan in place is. And now we have to just see how it plays out. We're not going to know today, tomorrow, a month from now, if it's going to work out or not. It's going to be a year or 2 before we even have an idea. And I know this sounds like I don't want to be that guy. But whenever people are like, oh, what a crap draft, like 24 hours in, I can't respect that. But the same way, I'm the same way for the opposite. Anybody saying right now, oh my God, the Bills are killing this draft. Like, no, we don't know.
Exactly. Look, that's fair. I just praised the Ravens for taking Mike Green. Mike Green could be out of the NFL in 2 years, or he could be an all-pro player. You know what I mean? You don't know. And to that point, 2006, I am blogging for Fox Sports, and I covered the Buffalo Bills 2006 draft, and they sucked ass on defense, and they spent a lot of resources on defense, just like this year, and they drafted Dante Widner 8th. They traded up for John McCargo at 26. They took Ashton Yabodi in the 3rd round. They took Co Simpson in the 4th round. And I wrote about the Bills in one weekend because it used to be a weekend draft back in those good old days. the Bills transformed almost overnight into what could become one of the more exciting defenses in the entire NFL. I gave the draft or the grade an A, and I will never grade a draft again because of 2006. Ironically, the guy who got skimmed over in that draft was Kyle Williams in the 5th round, who it turned out to be a beast, a stud. So I get it to that point. RJ, again, another regular on the show. First, I don't think we needed to trade up for TJ. Second, we traded up in the second to draft a backup defensive tackle. Also goes on to say, I'm actually more pissed about drafting a backup defensive tackle high in the second round than I am with Landon Jackson. I actually like the Jackson move more than most. Do you know Sean McDermott defense? There almost isn't a such thing as a starter on the defensive line. Everyone plays like 40 to 55% of the snaps. You know what I mean? I don't like hearing that with TJ Sanders. I don't think TJ Sanders, I don't think the Bills traded up 15 spots in the second round for him to be a backup. All right. Don't you feel like, let's give Brandon Beane a little more credit than that, Mike, right? I mean, that's.
Yeah. And that's the ridiculous thing about all the reaction. Did people think that if the Bills drafted a defensive tackle at 30, that suddenly the guy's going to play 80% of the snaps?
Yeah.
It wasn't going to make a difference either way. They weren't drafting a defensive tackle who was going to suddenly just play every snap. It's about going at teams in waves, having versatility, having different ways of attacking guys. Ed Oliver's out of the game. You're going to need somebody else to pass rush in a big moment. And what have we seen about this team in recent years defensively? They go through waves of injuries. This is football. Guys get hurt. And the last thing I'm tired of happening every single season is, well, if this guy didn't go down, we would have had a chance to beat the Chiefs in the playoffs. No, how about build your depth so when somebody does go down, you can withstand it and still give a team your all and have a chance at getting a victory. Like, fans complain when you improve your depth, but then not improve your depth. They don't give credit for improving your depth, but then when you don't have any, they complain, where is it? The draft is about improving your team and fixing holes on your roster. The fact of it is, the Bills don't have many holes on their roster. That's why they win 11 to 13 games every year. That's why they go to the AFC Championship this past season. They had very minimal holes. Corner 2 was one of them. And now they're trying to fix their depth on the defensive line so they can be stronger. I don't know how this can be perceived as anything bad. What it comes down to is lack of name familiarity, and the guys that they drafted aren't guys that many fans have watched or seen before, so they assume that they're worse than other guys that they've heard of.
Agree with that mostly. I still think there's an element that people are just really mad because the Bills took a guy who's primarily a 3 tech defensive tackle.
But would you take a 1 tech at this point in the second round? It goes back to what I was kind of saying earlier. The Bills have never shown that they prioritize it. So why would they suddenly magically prioritize it after 8 years of being in Buffalo? And I agree with you, Pat. I want a better 1 tech on this roster. I don't think Daquan Jones is who he was when he came to Buffalo. But there's a little bit of being naive by the fan base if they think suddenly the Bills are going to care about something that they just have never cared about in recent years.
So before the draft, round 1, I made it pretty clear. My guy was Derek Harmon. That was the guy I wanted because he's a 1 and he's a 3. He could do both. I think TJ Sanders, and this is a comparison I've heard, TJ Sanders he's 90% of Derek Harmon. So he's not going to just play 3. I'm telling you now. I don't give a shit what Brandon Beane said tonight. I promise you right now, you are going to see plenty of snaps, especially when it's 3rd and 6. You are going to see Sanders and Ed Oliver playing alongside each other. I'm pulling up a comment right now again from Anthony. We picked Oliver and Epenesa's replacements. I agree about Epinesa. I don't agree about Ed Oliver. I don't think this is Ed Oliver's last year on this football team. I don't see any reason why this should be his last year on this football team. He's still young enough. He actually played well in the playoffs last year, which is something I cannot say about him the previous couple of years. Thought he was really good in the playoffs. Thought he was really good against the Bengals and even Kansas City as well. He showed up against Kansas City. I thought he was garbage the couple of years before that in the elimination losses. He just wasn't good. So I don't buy that. I do buy it with AJ, but it's a shout out. Student Body Right says LSU's new D-line coach, Kyle Williams. Hell yeah, dude. Shout out, by the way, Do Champions. Did their show yesterday from Resurgence. It was loud. I couldn't really hear shit, but it was fun. All right, before we get out of here, let me ask you this, man. What about this draft as a whole has surprised you the most? I want to talk about the Bills. Like, what's been one or two stunners that you could think of off the top of your head, putting you on the spot here? One or two stunners right now, now that we're through 2 nights.
I don't want to say this is the biggest stunner, but I'm definitely was caught off guard by Shedeur Sanders' fall to, I don't know, as of this recording, I don't know if he was drafted.
He wasn't.
Hasn't even been drafted yet. I thought a fall was possible, but I never thought he was going to make it out of the second round. And my big takeaway from this is that the baggage isn't worth the B+ prospect. And if he wasn't going to go to a team where he could start, teams were not willing to basically bring him on to be a backup. And that's what he's facing right now. He's a day 1, day 2 talent. He should be a top 30 to 40 pick, worst case scenario. But basically, he has the ego of his father, but he doesn't have the talent to back it up. And his father played a position where it was okay to have an ego. He was a corner, spent some time at wide receiver. At quarterback, you need to be a leader of your team. You are a leader of men in a locker room. And the last thing any NFL franchise wants is an entitled young man who throws other people under the bus, who doesn't take accountability for his mistakes and failures. And now a great talent is paying the price. And I feel bad for him because I don't think it's all his fault. I think a lot of it is his upbringing, the people that surround him, and him being told his entire life how good he is. And I get it. That's who Deion is. Deion's a Hall of Fame player. He's a great coach. He was an amazing commentator. But Deion really could have benefited his son by telling him and teaching him a couple different values and a couple different ways of carrying himself, knowing that Deion got away with certain things because of his special talent, and not realizing that Shedeur was not going to get away with those same things because of the position he plays and lesser talent overall.
I at this point, I'm starting to wonder, like, where in the hell is he even going to end up, man? Where is he going to end up? Like, every team that needs a quarterback in this draft pretty much is taking one. When Dillon Gabriel goes off the board at pick, I think it was 94 to Cleveland. I kept waiting for Cleveland from 2 to, what was it, 33, 36, 30, whatever it was. I kept waiting for Cleveland to be the team to take him eventually, and they just never did. And then they take Dillon Gabriel. I'm like, well, holy shit, man, that's pretty wild. For me, there's 2 things. Number one, just because they spent so much time talking about him, and in Buffalo, he was just such a popular person to talk about in mock drafts with Xavier Watts. I'm a big fan of his. I watch him play every week at Notre Dame. He didn't go into the 3rd round into Atlanta. And again, that whole, you never know shit, like smoke season mock drafts, you do learn a lot, and there's a lot to be learned from mock drafts, and they're fun, and they're a good exercise, and they prepare you for a lot of scenarios and a lot of players. But who the hell was the safety's name that went before him? Holy shit, man. So we're watching the 3rd round, and I'm like, well, who the hell is going to take Xavier Watts? Atlanta finally, Jonas Sanker, a safety from Virginia, got drafted before Xavier Watts, a guy who people were saying, including me, I don't know that he's going to make it to 56. I might have to move up if I want to go get Xavier Watts. That stuns me. And for all the people out there to say Pat Moran's just a homer, let me tell you the thing that's impressed me most about this draft for now. You ready? The New England Patriots. I am a big fan of their draft. Big fan of their draft. Okay, they go get Will Campbell. They get the offensive tackle at 4, which, you know, if they would have won that game or lost that game in week 18, they would have had the first pick in the draft. I kind of feel like in a way, a small way, maybe it was a little bit of a blessing because they went and got an offensive tackle. They probably would have taken Abdul Carter or Hunter with the first pick overall. But anyway, forget it's neither here nor there. Campbell, I love that pick for them. And then I'm going through that. Then they go get Travion Henderson, an explosive home run hitting running back. Then they go get a wide receiver in round 3 that I really loved. I thought he'd be I had him in my Bills mock draft, my last one. Kyle Williams. And they go get a center from Georgia, Jared Wilson, who could start as a rookie. They're really building an offense around Drake May. And they spent, and not obviously Stephon Diggs, they got a gazillion receivers. And they spent a lot of money on their defensive free agency to upgrade that. I think, and I've seen this flying around, and I bought into it before the draft, and now I'm really buy into it. I think the Patriots are the second best team in the AFC East right now at this point. You agree with that?
I could see it. I don't know if I would jump them over Miami yet, but what I will say is their 2-3 year trajectory is much better. And I wouldn't be surprised to see New England 2 years from now being back in the playoffs with Vrabel. They are building things the right way. Vrabel is an intelligent coach. He knows how football games are won. I don't think he ever had an amazing roster in Tennessee, but they were consistently competitive. And I'm not going to be surprised if New England gets back to winning 10-plus games a year in the near future. Now, I'm not going to say that's going to happen overnight, but they're working on their line. I think Drake May has talent. And in time, I think the Patriots are going to be a formidable opponent. The Jets aren't going anywhere. The Miami, that's a train wreck waiting to happen. So I do think the Patriots could be a challenge in a couple seasons.
Yeah, for sure. Look, maybe a couple seasons and maybe sooner. We see it every year. Every year, dude, a team sucks and then they don't. Look at the Washington Commanders last year. Look at the Houston Texans 2 years ago. You know what I mean? You go from 2 or 3 wins and bam, you're in the mix. Anyway, all right, that's going to do it for this bonus Saturday episode. I appreciate very much everyone who's been watching us live, over almost 1,200 people checking in with us. Big thank you, Mike Bundt, Trainwreck Sports. You boys grind. I say it all the time. If there's something going on, and I'm not even just talking about Bills and Sabres, if it's Bandits, if it's Micah Hyde softball game, if it's college, which you personally do such a good job covering UB stuff. You guys are everywhere. The grind is real with Trainwreck Sports. So make sure you follow Mike on Twitter at Mike_Bundt. I appreciate you, man. Appreciate you doing this on short notice and staying up so late with me on a Friday night.
Anytime. Thanks for having me. And I'm always down talking Bills football. It doesn't matter what time of the day, what time of the year. I love doing it.
All right. Thank you, Mike. And by the way, I will be live Sunday night. Joe from Queens will join me. And for everybody clamoring out there for him, ranting and bitching and raving, you'll get plenty of it, I'm sure. Even though he don't know shit about these players, to his credit, he'll tell you he don't know shit about them, and he just likes to bitch and moan about everything anyway. But that'll be live again Sunday night, 9 p.m. From Mike Bundt at Moran here. Have a good weekend. I don't plan on being on again until Sunday night, but if something crazy happens with the Bills, like they make a trade or something like that big on Saturday, then we'll do something. If not, talk to you guys live Sunday night.